Hello and welcome to the Thinking Fellows podcast. My name is Caleb Keith, and today I am joined by Scott Keith, Adam Francisco, and Bruce Hellman. The Thinking Fellows is part of the 1517 podcast network of shows. You can go to 1517.org/podcasts to find all of our shows there, including a couple of other shows hosted by some of the Thinking Fellows here. You can find those by going to 1517.org/podcasts or just by going to 1517.org. And there we have a very nice homepage which curates new content every day that's being published. And so you can go check it out there. There's a podcast tab and you can see some of the stuff that is showing up every week. Okay, guys, we are doing a special request today, a request from another member of 1517's Thinking Fellowship who called my dad up and said, I am getting asked for a list of books that helps. I mean, you can help frame it, Dad, because Chad actually asked you, but that helps people or gives people an essential reading list as an introduction to Lutheranism as they're coming in. And is there a list we could hand people? So I thought, you know what, we can do double duty here. We can make this list on Thinking Fellows, and then maybe I can take this and we can get it mocked up as an article that goes up on the website too, for people, and just have it as a static resource.
I owe Kelsey an article, so that's a really good idea.
There you go. So we're all apparently research assistants for my dad's blogs now.
Which you all are anyway. I mean, let's just be real. This is how it goes. Adam knows this fact.
Reals. But by somebody, how'd you put it? Introducing somebody to Lutheranism. We're just talking theology, or are we talking?
So it's from Chad Bird, who, if the listeners don't know, they should go follow him on the socials. I assume he's on everything.
There probably already are based on,
but he's very interactive with people on social media, which I find very dangerous because, I'm not as nice as Chad. So I never did that, but he does. And he gets a question every now and then. He said, this one comes and goes, but it's been kind of coming in a flood lately. And it's just, he just said, have you ever put together a list of basic books everyone interested in Lutheranism should read? And I said, I'm sure we've done shows in that vicinity before, but what I told him is, hey, we're recording on Tuesday. We'll do a show on it. From the show, we'll put together a list and send it your way so that he can have it kind of in his back pocket to send people. And that's how this show came about.
Now, I do want to lay some ground rules here, which is the list is going to have some assumptions on it that we can talk about, but you don't get to cop out. So, Small Catechism, assumed. Augsburg Confession, assumed. Some of these other ones that I'll put on the list as sort of like, these have to be included. But for the sake of the Thinking Fellows here, you got to kind of avoid these very, very easy answers. So,
there goes two of mine.
Because, yeah.
How is the Bible fair game?
No,
that's assumed.
Reading Romans twice.
He's like, how about the Book of Romans?
Yeah. We're gonna just assume that those are in the list. We'll put them in the list for listeners who are familiar with the show, and maybe for new listeners, those are going to automatically be in the list. So we're talking, I guess it could be old or contemporary, but the main thing on my mind is accessible. I'm worried because I think my list is going to get stolen because my list was given to me by somebody else in this room at some point. So
we're going to have some overlaps, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
You took mine.
That's fine. And maybe that means our list gets smaller, because one of the things I was worried about with this is, my dad said, each of us should maybe pick 3. My worry with that is, who's going to read 12 books, in addition to the Small Catechism and stuff. So maybe if you hear yours picked, then you're just going to have to say I lose on that one.
Like pick another one.
Well, geez, man. Maybe it's just a good book then.
Well, okay.
So Why don't we go in a circle? I don't know how to do this when we're all virtual here. But this way, you only get one, and then we'll go back around. That way, you can't steal via all three.
I want to go first then before Adam steals mine.
Okay, you go left, and then I guess it's going to be Adam, Bruce, me. This is the way this fake virtual circle will work.
I am going to choose, just kind of right out of the gate, a novel. So probably Adam won't choose it because Adam doesn't read novels at all.
That is correct, sir.
He only reads serious.
I know what you're going to say. I think it's a good novel.
Serious material from Adam only. But I'm just going to pick Bo Garrett's The Hammer of God. Mostly because it creates, from the perspective of a couple different stories of pastors in Sweden. So I just came from Sweden, if you didn't know already.
Fancy.
I know.
Fancy.
But in my opinion, it really gives you a picture of what Lutheran preaching ought to look like from a picture point of view, rather than sort of didactically just saying, like, for instance, in Ferdy's Theologies for Proclamation, you'll sort of get the teaching version of the importance of preaching in Lutheran theology, or the centrality of preaching in Lutheran theology. But in The Hammer of God, you get a sort of novelette picture of it. So, Bo Garrett's The Hammer of God.
And just say that book, if listeners are interested, it has one of the best defenses or explanations of infant baptism without being very heavily into all the doctrinal kind of statements. It's just a very good, convincing, if you're curious about that, that's a good book to, one of the chapters of one of the stories with one of the pastors there does a really good job at expressing the Lutheran opinion, kind of through a real life, well, I guess a fiction, but a hypothetical real life situation.
And definitely lay level.
Yeah, for sure.
So there you go. Kind of 4.4 out of 5 on Goodreads. I think it should be 5 out of 5, but
it's always one.
It's one of the 5 novels I've read.
This is.
I think it's Lord of the Rings, and there's 3 there. So that's 4. So you only have 1 left.
No, that's probably 4 for Adam. We made him read Lord of the Rings, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah. So is it my turn?
Yeah, it's Adam's turn.
I just want to say first, for the record, I have read novels. And in fact, Scott, I just read an autobiography, John Montgomery's, but that's still kind of theology.
Yeah, that's a novel.
I am, however, in the middle of reading George St. Pierre's autobiography. And you're like, who's that? And I know you're going to roll your eyes, but it's a UFC fighter, but it's a very unique dude. So I'm reading something that's not frivolous, but not at all related to my
Isn't it funny how Adam,
profession.
It seems like Adam kind of thinks that autobiographies are novels?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, I guess.
He's not reading.
No. But what I meant is I read outside of serious stuff.
It's like people talk about themselves are just making stuff up.
And I, like I said last episode, I'm reading gender theory stuff, all over the map, man. I'm a man of many interests.
What about science stuff? You might like that.
Too long. Solzhenitsyn I'll read. But, my pick is, and Scott's probably going to roll his eyes again, but Where Christ
is rolling my eyes a lot.
It's a 1517 book. It's a collection of essays. Edited by John Warwick Montgomery, this now sainted and blessed John Warwick Montgomery, and Jean or Edward Veith. And the title is Where Christ is Present, a Theology for All Seasons on the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. The book was written, I assume it came out 2017. I don't remember, but because it's the 500th anniversary, I'm sure it did. But it's chapters by leading Lutheran thinkers on the major points of Lutheran doctrine, but also there's a nice chapter on the biography of Luther, nice chapter on Lutherans and arts and things like that. So it's a pretty comprehensive sort of overview and written for a more popular audience. So very accessible. And also, just a little side note, it was after that book was published and a one Dr. Scott Keith read a chapter on the authority of Scripture in the Lutheran tradition, wrote a blog post where he called me do you remember, Scott?
Genius, I'm sure. Sure it counts.
hopefully we won't lose our clean rating in listeners, but he says, he wrote, Adam Francisco is a badass. Do you remember that?
It's a very good article.
Would have been better if he said Disco Francisco.
And I remember reading it well because, Dr. Montgomery was the editor, and I had just come down with Bell's palsy, so I couldn't close my left eyelid. So it was like so hard to look at a computer screen, and he's like, "Where's my article?" I'm like, "I'm writing it. I got Bell's palsy," and he's making jokes about me not being able to wink, and I'm like, anyway. Sorry, I'm getting.
That's what you need when you just come down with Bell's palsy and Montgomery stressing you out.
I know. Yeah. So there we have it. You could read I'm sitting right next to the 1580 edition of the Book of Concord.
He's right in the library. Yeah, he's surrounded by a living witness of
it. Dropped straight from heaven right there.
Right in his lap.
Yeah.
All right, Bruce, your turn.
Yeah, so the first book I'm going to recommend is, I believe, out of print, which all the good books are, but you can get it on Amazon or Aid Books or whatever, by a relatively unknown Lutheran theologian named Karl Wisloff, called "I Know in Whom I Believe: Studies in Bible Doctrine." It's a small little book. It's just over 100 pages, I think. It's not much bigger than a catechism. And the way I guess I would describe this is a sort of like a Wikipedia of Lutheranism before Wikipedia existed, but highly pastoral. So this book introduces people who probably are unaware of what Lutheranism is. But in Wisloff, he's Norwegian, so he's writing to people who sort of, there's obviously it's the English translation, but he's writing to Norwegians who have very cultural Christianity, but don't actually know the distinctives of their own tradition. And he's trying to introduce them to those distinctives. What makes Lutheranism, and why do we believe what we believe? So the book doesn't have to be read cover to cover. You can actually go to it looking for answers to, like, what do Lutherans think about this? And you're not going to get a super in-depth view of it. You are going to get a pretty accurate, pretty solid synopsis of the very general, broad movements, ideas, theology of Lutheranism, with a nice pastoral sense. So this is not a book for people who want to go really deep into theology, but it's a great starting place if you're curious about Lutheranism, or if you are a Lutheran and you just want to get a little deeper sense of distinctiveness. And then from there, you'll have a better place to know, like, where to jump to go deeper if you want, or maybe you'll just be satisfied with the kind of answer that you get on the surface. But I know in whom I believe.
I got to say, like, you just now really filled the role of Rod on this show perfectly, because the first book you recommend,
that's a pretty big shoes to fill,
is not only out of print, but is completely unavailable to find on Amazon. So good job.
Wait. No, I see it on Amazon, right? Let me see.
You can go ahead and click that paperback and see what happens.
Oh, yeah. You can get it right now. It's actually very expensive. All right. There's one copy.
A PDF of this scan.
But you can get it on Aid Books or different. Every 30 years or something, someone republishes a small amount of them, and then that's it.
I'm trying to find it on Abe just to help our listeners.
If you would like this book, you're going to have to go to the Contact at 1517 page, and we will have Bruce scan you
every page
personally.
If we can do that, I will. If I don't, we definitely can do it. That's like
how nice he is.
He is Rod.
Copyright.
That's exactly what Rod would do. It's out of print. Well, scan it, and I'll just hand it out.
Rod would hand me a USB drive. He'll be like, "Here you go."
Yeah. Let's see if we legally can do that. Then we will.
We can't legally do it, but
for teaching purposes, there's a lot of gray holes.
Who's going to try? I applaud you.
Yeah.
This is a wild conversation about. At first I was thinking this is going to be a really boring episode, but it's getting quite interesting very quickly.
This is how theologians get crazy.
Yeah. And historians.
My other two recommendations are very accessible in print, but this book, if you can find this book, it's really worth.
What's funny is I actually think that in Rod's library, that we haven't unpacked yet. The parts of it we haven't unpacked, I think it's in there.
It probably is. Okay. My turn, I suppose. Oh, I'm going to go with a safe one here. And I'm going to say Bob Kolb's The Genius of Luther's Theology.
I lose. You took my second one.
Yeah, that was on my list too.
Great book. I'd say a little less accessible.
Oh, I think very accessible, but maybe that's because you're so smart. No, it's just being Lutheran too long. I don't know.
No, it's a great book. I think I had you read it when you were like...
Yes. So my stack of books, this is going to be easy to steal, came to me when I was like 12. And it was like a stack, this book, and it was handed to me by him right there. And this was in the stack, probably really near the top of the stack. It also included Hammer of God and, Where Christ is Present wasn't published yet, Adam, but I'm sure it would have
absolutely
made it to stack. So...
was Martin Luther and Islam in the stack?
Oh, no, for sure. I mean,
yeah,
absolutely.
It
was
okay. It's like the third book I read.
Third book, then.
Yeah. So,
good to hear. Good to hear.
But I think books like this work because when somebody asks this question to me, I kind of assume, or generally to chat, like if somebody sends this social media thing, our instinct would be like, well, small catechism and at least read the first 4 articles of the Augsburg Confession or something. I don't think confessions in that sense help make it click. Or like if you hand somebody a small catechism, they go, "This is the 10 Commandments." What do you, are you talking about? This is what Lutheran theology is. And I think the Genius of Luther's Theology manages to put sort of a narrative on the ideas that make it into those books that are behind the Reformation. That is accessible and is what, at the end of the day, I think people are asking for. Because when people ask for this book, they're not asking for a list of doctrines that Lutherans believe in. They're asking to get a picture of what Lutheranism is, kind of a vibe check, so to speak. So, and I think this does a good job. It's in a series of books that you could recommend that then all are sort of about Luther, which I think is interesting because, as we've talked about, Lutheranism is not just Luther. In fact, when we go for it, we talk about these confessions. But I do think if you come from sort of this Reformation history perspective and you dump it in, these confessions are being written around this, breakthrough moments that Luther has about what is not being taught in the church and what the Bible teaches and proclaims is true. And so I think this is a good starting point for seeing the distinctiveness of Lutheran theology, but framed in a sense of this is a defect in the church, and Luther is saying this is what Scripture is proclaiming. And so I think it also helps frame Lutheranism in a quite biblical light as well.
Awesome.
To Scott's point, I used to take every new elder when I was pastor for years. This was one of the books that we would go through together with elder candidates before they would sort of be up for a vote for elder. And, a lot of these guys either had been lifelong Lutherans or some of them had come into Lutheranism at some point, earlier in their walk. But they had never really read a theology book before, like an actual theology book. So I would say it was about 50-50 with guys who either could easily track with it or who kind of struggle a little bit with just reading an academic book, to Scott's point. So even though they were familiar with the tradition, I think for a layperson, they have to be a layperson who just knows what they're getting into. It's not to your point, Caleb, I wouldn't say it's like a hard to understand book, but it does read sort of like an academic.
It is it is published by Baker, so
and to that point, I think it's just called. I'd have to look it up. Bob Kolb's Christian Theology doesn't as much, and so it's not that Kolb isn't capable of writing sort of just a basic doctrine book that doesn't sound academic. I would say if you read this book, just work your way up the list that we've gone to so far. By the time you've worked your way up to the list, you're going to be able to you're going to be able to read this book no problem. Maybe work your way up to it.
I think it's more of a stylistic thing than it's comprehensive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
You mentioned
the co-author is Charles Bjarn too, and I'm not familiar with a popular level book that he's done. So that could be part of it.
Neither. Yeah.
You mentioned Kolb's, I think you call it Christian theology. I think, is it this? Did you mean the Christian faith?
That's it.
Or
Yeah, that's
different
the one.
ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That actually, I mean, that's a very user-friendly, if you will, systematic theology.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good.
Well, too.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yep.
It wasn't going to be my. It was going to be like my backup suggestion, so I'm just going to add it. My turn.
Well, I think you just used two turns.
Oh man, come on. Okay, then my turn that's not my turn is going to be a cheat. Anyway, I think we got to put on this list free to be, which is technically speaking the Small Catechism, which violates our rules a little bit.
Although it's kind of a guide to reading it.
Yeah, it's the Small Catechism
Commentary.
with commentary attached by Jim Nestigan and Gerhard Ferde, and it is outstanding. Like, it is top of the heap, outstanding. In fact, I'd say if you are just coming to Lutheranism, it is the book I'd have you read first. Like, I'm just interested in Lutheranism, read Free to Be first, and then go from there.
I'd
It's
maybe
just
even say
outstanding.
read the first paragraph.
Yeah, God,
and that
made a
kind of
decision about you.
Yeah. He's not looked at how you're going to respond or how good you are or
Totally excellent.
what. And since we've been talking kind of user friendly stuff, I'm going to go to, I don't know if it's slightly or even more than that, but and I'm not sure if there's controversy surrounding this book or not. I know there's controversy surrounding the author, but Werner Ehlert's Structure of Lutheran Theology or Structure of Lutheranism is actually, it's complicated, but
love that book.
yeah, it's outstanding. CPH published it, republished it just not too long ago. And
When I said we should do the dogmatic system based on that, you rolled your eyes at me.
no, I did not. I would not have, because I think it's a great book because it's not just systematic theology or dogmatics. It's like the Lutheran worldview, if you will.
Bruce was there when it
For those who can't see right now, Caleb is rather animated on the screen.
I literally sat and tried to make an argument to use it.
Did you?
Yes.
That's so
Huh.
Well, I said it's my favorite systematic theology.
That's so.
Maybe it was my doppelganger. You did
It could have been.
I'm sorry, Caleb. Maybe I
The
just
one
was,
that doesn't have palsy.
probably what it was is like usual. I wasn't really paying attention to what you were saying, and I just knew what you're going to probably recommended something esoteric and
Just rolling your eyes, in due course. Okay.
I'm sorry, Caleb. We should do a series on Ehlert's Structure of Lutheranism, Caleb.
I think it's really quite good.
Yeah, it is. It is.
The narrative structure of doing the dogmatic is very good. And you're right. It's like the Lutheran worldview aspect of it is quite excellent.
Yeah. And but if not that text, Martin Luther and Islam. Just kidding.
That is, I just, I will say you just recommended like an 800-page book too.
Yeah.
Well, I said it was, but it's like one of those books. It's like, wow, you read that, you've read 10 books.
Yeah.
And not just in page count, but in terms of the content.
I think it's great that like you're making an 800-page book really efficient sounding.
Listen, you novel reading nerds.
War and Peace.
I will say you can occasionally get Structure of Lutheranism, because it's kind of an inside joke. CPH books will cost you your kidney. But I got my copy for $5 on a warehouse sale from CPH. So every once in a while they'll just give stuff away. So
yeah, because it seems like I just looked at it. It seems like the one that they're publishing is like one of those reprints. It's not like it's not like a re-edited.
No.
Because the citation comes up not as like something that was just published, but it still comes up as if you run the ISB, ISBN, it still comes up as the 1962 version.
And if you're really hardcore, you'll read the German version, Morphology des Luthertums.
How many pages is that one with all their?
Probably like 5,000.
It's
the translator
it's
was
2
like,
volumes.
the translator's like, we got to cut this down, guys.
What? I wonder if the translation is abridged. That'd be interesting. Well, if you're a nerd, it's an interesting question, but never mind. Let's move on.
We need to move to Bruce.
Yeah.
Well, my second one was the one Caleb picked. So I picked a sort of third, slightly out of the normal, what I assume people would pick, which is Philip Carey's book, The Meaning of Protestant Theology, Luther, Augustine, and the Gospel That Gives Us Christ. And what I liked about
sneak Augustine in, didn't you?
I had to.
The non-Lutheran.
Okay.
I know. Well, that's why I said it's a little bit of a dark horse. But let me explain my reasoning with this on why I think this is actually a very good book for people interested in Lutheranism. No, it is not a book directly on Lutheran theology. However, in the whole history of how Lutheranism is unique and contradistinct and comes out of Western theology, this book really nails it. And it really shows some of the indebtedness Lutheranism has to Augustine, but also where it breaks from Augustine and where Catholicism picks up that break. And then also the consequences of what Luther said, or the fracturing and breaking that came after Luther in Protestantism to all the different denominations we have now. And Carey is very much pro-Luther, if I could say it that way, in showing that Luther is very careful in the distinctions he makes and very Christocentric, and very much all about what Luther. One of the big things that Luther gives theology is the sort of clear recognition that Christ is someone outside of us, who we need to depend on, and that the Augustinian tradition, which is the popular tradition outside of Lutheranism in the West, is very much about Christ being in us, and looking for Christ inside us. So there's this whole kind of personal subjectivity that really messes up a lot of people, actually. And Carey goes on to show how Luther really pointed us to Christ as promised for us, Christ outside of us, Christ who's always coming to us in his word, and is therefore objective, and we can be certain in him because he is not caught up with our feelings and our intuitions and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to kind of get a sense of where Lutheranism sits among other Christian theologies in the West, that it's a really good book for that.
Cool.
All right. Mine. I'm gonna do another one that was in the stack, but I'm gonna do Stephen Paulson's Luther for Armchair Theologians.
That's a good choice.
Oh,
Paulson, especially nowadays, not known for being, short of words, but Luther for Armchair Theologians is very simple and good to read. And again, I think if you're really interested in Lutheranism, and I guess your Carey book hits some of this too, you're going to have questions about who Luther is, because this theology is still using his name. And so there's got to sort of be some reasons for that as far as the character of Luther. And I actually think some of the endearing part of Lutheranism's sell is the character of Luther. So I think Paulson does a good job with that. Then obviously intertwines the sort of the essential doctrines. And again, this is sort of a journey of the Reformation book, which I find important for people coming into Lutheranism, because especially if you're asking this question because you've been watching some 1517 videos or listening to some 1517 podcasts, there's obviously been some really compelling theology that you've picked up on already. And so then I think one of the hard parts to catch up on if you're thinking about jumping into Lutheranism is this sort of story of Lutheranism that's around it. And the more ways that you get that narrative, I kind of think the better. So I think that's Luther for Armchair Theologians is super readable and a great place to start.
Cool. I've been kicking around my third, perhaps fourth pick, depending on how you're counting. Yeah. So, I'm the boss. So, If I get 4, I get 4. So the and I've been debating. So this is maybe going to be a cheat because it might end up as 5 picks for me. I think there needs to be a book in this recommendation on the doctrine of vocation within Lutheranism. There's a classic in our world by Gene Veith called God at Work, which is very good. But 1517 published one a couple years ago by Michael Berg that's just called Vocation, which is also very good. And so I'm going to go with the shameless self-promotion of our materials and go with the Michael Berg Vocation book. But if you get really interested in vocation, there's, Gene Veith's book too, God at Work. So this is just the idea that very often Christians want to sort of answer the question, what can I do for God? And when they find out the answer that God doesn't need you to do anything for him, they get a little disappointed. And then the doctrine of vocation comes in and God says, instead of trying to do things for me, everything you have comes from me. So don't do anything for me. Don't give me back what I gave you, but share it with your neighbor, share your gifts with your neighbor. And so that's the idea of Christian vocation. And Michael Berg does a very good job in his book just entitled Vocation.
Okay. I don't know if this will surprise you, but I'm going to recommend Carl, I think his middle initial is S. Truman's Luther and the Christian Life.
I thought you were going to say Karl Marx.
No, there will be a little bit of overlap with the what Scott just mentioned, vocation, but it's much bigger than that. And it's something, when you think of Luther or Lutheranism, you think, weak on sanctification and things like that, right? This work is pretty good at dispelling that there's no room for thinking of those things in a Lutheran framework. So, and Carl Truman is not a Lutheran; he's an Orthodox Presbyterian. But why I like the book is it's so well written, and so it's clean, and it corresponds to life and thought of Luther across his life. So a lot of stuff on Luther focuses in on the so-called early Luther, and like the last 15, 20 years kind of get glossed over or quickly referred to. But there's a lot of fruitful stuff in the later Luther, and he covers it all. So, and he also this would be interesting if somebody read that and Paulson's Luther for Armchair Theologians. I've not read that book, but if the issue of like the third use of the law and whether you find it in Luther or not is in, at least Truman argues that it is in Luther. So.
I see what you're doing there. You're just
you've just now put a knock on that book, Adam.
Why? How?
Oh, well, maybe some.
It's good. It's a good yin and yang kind of thing. I don't know what.
Paulson doesn't really drag the third use law into the Armchair Theologians one that much, but
the Armchair Theologians is part of a series that was put out by John Knox Press. You'll get, or Armchair, not Theologians, but you'll get. In that series, there's a bunch of armchair. It's a sort of common man version of the Oxford, a very short introduction kind of series.
Yeah, it has comics in it.
Like I said, it's every man's version of the Oxford, very short introduction series with the focus.
And
on
that series,
man.
By the way, some of those are more well received than others. So if you are interested in that series, do your homework and read some of the reviews, because some of them are considered wildly inaccurate. Not the Lutheran one, but there are some where, like the Bart one, and there's another one on what's his name? Not Harnack. Somebody, and they're just like lambasted that they don't get it right. So check on those if you like that series.
No, I won't.
You'll just eat anything that's put in front of you.
No, he's saying that Scott just says for the common man, and I'm not the common man. I'm not reading that book.
All right, Bruce.
Another good little book, and it may seem silly, but it is it's filled with primary source material. And if you're not someone who's a huge reader, but you're like, I'm interested in Lutheranism, but I don't really want to sit and read some big thing about it, the little devotional Day by Day that's selected writings of Martin Luther is a really good way to actually just get a sense of Luther's pastoral heart and sort of soak up his theology without having it necessarily explained to you in a doctrinal way. You'll really see the heart of Luther as a pastor who cares for people and wants to show them how the gospel transforms their lives. And, in like 3 paragraphs a day, like it's totally doable by someone who's not even really a big reader. So again, you're not going to be able to like wax eloquently afterwards on all the fine points of Lutheranism, but you'll absorb kind of the heart of our tradition, I think, through that book.
I totally breezed out for the title. I'm sorry. What was it?
Day by Day.
A Day by Day.
Who's the author?
Martin Luther.
Oh, that's I know that. It's on my shelf.
Day by Day. Isn't
it called Day by Day with Martin? Isn't it called Day by Day with Martin Luther?
Wait, am I thinking Godspell? Or am I thinking Jesus Christ Superstar, where they sing Day by Day? I think it's Godspell.
I don't watch musicals.
Yes, you are correct with the subtitle.
Yeah, it is Day by Day.
I'm just saying, Luther might, maybe he liked the musical theater.
Scott, I seem to recall going to Les Miserables with you.
I very much like some musicals.
Do you remember that?
I did. You fell asleep, I believe.
That's like the most gospel-centered musical of all time.
It is, and he fell asleep. Yeah, fell asleep.
He doesn't like novels. Why would he appreciate art of the musical theater?
All right, last one. It is a 1517 book now. We're going to do how Melanchthon helped Luther discover the gospel. Adds a second character to my little theme here of understanding or getting a picture of the Reformation and the formation of Lutheranism, so in Philip Melanchthon. But mostly this book focuses on the doctrine of justification and why that became the article upon which the church stands and falls for Lutheranism, why that was sort of preached, why they wouldn't give it up. And it helps put some pieces together in this story that makes it look like it helps this idea that, it just popped out of Luther's head, and it didn't. It explains how multiple people reading the scripture were having this justification proclaimed to them in the Word, and why the conviction of that became necessary to sort of give up everything, forfeit their lives, essentially, for it. And I think it's very good, very accessible book, and another one to certainly add to the list if you're going to, have like a new library of Lutheranism that you're building.
Any others? Any other cheats? Before I finalize the list here.
There's so much good stuff out there. I think that's a good amount for people if they are curious. I mean, I think people could also write in, though, if they're curious about like very specific subtopics or something, and they're like, hey, I'm curious about this, about Lutheranism, like, so can you recommend something? We're always willing to share that if we can help. But for a broad overview, I think this is good.
All right.
Cool.
I'm going to need all of you to send me a short paragraph on your recommendation so that I can include it in my blog that's due. In your work as my research assistant.
When is this due?
I mean, probably a week ago.
Adam, you should write it while driving. That'll be...
Yeah.
Yeah, do voice to text while you're driving.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Why not?
It's dangerous, Bruce. It's dangerous.
Oh, okay.
He has a family to get home safe.
Adam, when he drives, is a good noodle. He puts his phone on Do Not Disturb. You can't get a hold of him at all. He's a good noodle.
That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly what he teaches his kids that are learning to driving to do too.
Funny.
I don't want to be distracted.
That's right.
Well, great, guys. Well, thank you for this episode. I'll put links to these books, the ones that are available at least, Bruce, into the show notes below. You follow those links primarily to Amazon, and I'll have alternative links for the 1517 ones as well that go to our shop if you would like to buy the book directly from us. Any other closing things, and then we'll put this out as an article too, so there'll be a static list that you can refer to, and
It'll go out as an article as soon as I get their paragraphs.
all right. Well, sounds very good. We thank you for listening to this episode of the show. Do not forget to check out the show notes. All these book recommendations will be there, but also links to things currently happening at 1517 are down there as well. So please do go check that out. We will catch you next time. Bye.